Welcome to Ask the Expert with noted radio host Steve Sleeper. Each week, Steve interviews entrepreneurs and professionals and shares their intriguing stories of success and service. Now, here's radio veteran Steve Sleeper.
And today we're talking with David Hoskins, who's a bankruptcy attorney in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver. Dave, how you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Steve?
I can't complain. Doesn't do any good anyhow. So, hey, Dave, tell me a little bit about your firm and yourself.
Well, okay. I've been practicing law since about this time in 1981. I've been practicing bankruptcy since 2003, and that's all I've done since 2003 is practicing bankruptcy. For a better part of a decade with a small bankruptcy firm, and then since about 2012, I've been on my own. I have an office here in Denver, or just on the east side of downtown Denver. I like to call this Uptown. And then I also have a satellite office in Pueblo, Colorado, which is about 110 miles to the south. And I do Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and I do Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Those are essentially what consumers would do in bankruptcy, although not all of my clients are, quote, consumers. Some of them are small business people.
So tell me, what is bankruptcy?
Well, bankruptcy is, let's just call it a fresh start. One gets to a point where you don't have the resources, the income, assets, or whatever to deal with debt. And so you go to the court. The only place you can get bankruptcy in the United States is through a federal court, it's a bankruptcy court. And you essentially say, here's who I am, here's what I own, here's what I owe, here are my resources, income and otherwise, and give me a discharge of my debts. Get rid of my debts for me so I can start over. And so that's the essence of it.
Okay, so what's the difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13?
Well, Chapter 7 is sometimes called straight bankruptcy, sometimes called liquidation bankruptcy. I think liquidation is more descriptive. Essentially, one will give up in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy unprotected property, technically called non-exempt property. And in exchange for giving up that non-exempt property, they get a discharge of their debts. And Chapter 13 is an arrangement to pay something to creditors, depending upon what you can afford to pay. If one has disposable income, more income than reasonable living expenses, then you are forced into a Chapter 13 bankruptcy for 5 years, and you will pay back something to your creditors over that period of time.
Okay, so why would I need an attorney to file bankruptcy?
Contrary to, I think, popular myth, bankruptcy is a very technical and demanding process. It has huge pitfalls, not the least of which are criminal pitfalls if you don't do it correctly. I think and another way to do it is that people have always asked me throughout my career, why do I need an attorney for that? And I say, well, what's at stake? What have you got to lose in that process, whatever that process might be? What's the downside? Because if the downside is big, if the downside is more than you can afford to lose, you need to have somebody on your side who knows the rules. And bankruptcy is no different than any other legal proceeding. There are huge pitfalls. You can lose your house, you can lose your savings, you could even lose your retirement if you don't know the rules.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's say I'm filing Chapter 7, which is liquidation. Do I get to keep anything then?
I will use. Well, let me say this: all property. When one files bankruptcy, everything you own, from your socks to your house, now belongs to the bankruptcy estate. And the bankruptcy estate is represented by a trustee. A trustee is there to manage the bankruptcy estate. So everything you own now belongs to the bankruptcy estate, except as exempted by law. And there are two sources of exemptions. One is state law, wherever you live, wherever you are filing the bankruptcy. Generally, we will look to the state law to see what does that state exempt from collection, or exempt from creditors who are coming to collect. And so, of course, what I know is Colorado. In Colorado, there are relatively generous exemptions that protect the basics of living. Place to live, a car to drive, food, clothing, furniture, tools of the trade. And I like to say it's a long list of things that are protected and a fairly short list of things that are not protected. The other source of exemptions would be federal law. The bankruptcy law itself contains exemptions, but you have to first look at state law. What does state law tell you to do as far as exemptions? Do you have to use state law, or does the state law say you can use bankruptcy law? So, anyway, so there are exemptions that protect, and those exemption laws vary widely from state to state. One state like Texas has an unlimited exemption for your homestead where you live.
Uh-huh.
Whereas there are other states where there's very little protection for where you live. So it varies widely, and one more reason why you need an attorney in bankruptcy.
Yeah. Good point. So can all types of debt be discharged?
No. Debt is discharged with certain exceptions. And generally, tax debt is not discharged. And I say generally because there are exceptions to that. But generally, taxes are not discharged. Student loans generally are not discharged. And there is some exception to that, although it's very limited. Debt arising out of divorce. Now, I have to distinguish between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. In Chapter 7, no debt that arises from a divorce will be discharged. Did I say Chapter 7? I did. Chapter 7, no debt arising from divorce would be discharged. Whereas in Chapter 13, there is some debt that arises from divorce that is discharged. It's a fairly technical area. And then debt that arises from criminal proceedings is not discharged. You got to pay your fines. You got to pay your penalties. You have to pay restitution. Those things cannot be discharged in a bankruptcy. There are other things that are not discharged in bankruptcy, like debt that is incurred through fraud. I mean, if you lie to your creditor in order to get credit, and the creditor steps forward and proves that to the bankruptcy court, then that debt will not be discharged. And there's quite a list of other things, but those are the big ones. Those are the ones that come up more often than anything. Is taxes, student loans, debt from divorce, debt from criminal proceedings, and fraud debt.
Okay, now you talked about divorce. Should I consider bankruptcy if I'm getting a divorce?
I think I would always advise somebody who is facing divorce to consult with a bankruptcy attorney, just so you know the rules, if nothing else, because there is an intersection of divorce and bankruptcy. I mean, certainly every divorce, I don't know every divorce, but darn near every divorce is going to have some financial distress involved. And so certainly, as everything's just falling apart, both sides are going to be thinking about whether or not bankruptcy is a smart thing to do. So it's good to check in with a bankruptcy attorney and see what the rules are. So yes, you should consider it. And should you do bankruptcy when you're getting a divorce? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. When should you do bankruptcy when you're getting a divorce? That's actually the more relevant question.
No.
I tell people that If you and your spouse come to me before the divorce, I will talk to you about the potential advantages of both of you doing a bankruptcy before doing a divorce. If one person comes to me before a divorce saying, well, I need to file bankruptcy, I know I'm going to have to file bankruptcy because this divorce is going to just murder me, and 9 times out of 10, I will say to them, do your divorce first. And after when the divorce is finished, then come back and see me. And there's some very technical reasons why those general rules, they're very general. Generally, if folks want to file bankruptcy together, I'd say do it before the divorce. Generally, if folks want to do a bankruptcy by themselves without their spouse joining in, I will say wait until after the divorce.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Will I ever be able to get credit again?
Sadly, yes. I say that tongue in cheek because there's certainly, I can tell you that there's some good folks out there giving advice about how credit is not necessarily a good thing to have, but because a lot of people just get in trouble with it. But the fact of the matter is, you file a bankruptcy, and the day after you file bankruptcy, you're going to get solicitations from creditors. In the front of the line will be car creditors. They love you. And they'll be more than happy once you get your bankruptcy discharge in a Chapter 7, or once you get a plan confirmed in a Chapter 13. They would just love to lend you money because they know that you're not going to be able to file bankruptcy for quite a while again, and they're going to charge you 20% interest or thereabouts. And so they are just in love with you. Yeah, absolutely, you get credit again. You just have to be more careful this time around.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. What's the most common question you get, Dave?
How much does it cost?
Yeah.
How much is it? Do your services cost? I mean, that's half the question. Half the calls I get, if not more than half the calls, lead with that question. What's it going to cost?
Yeah.
And of course the answer is, well, it depends. It depends on your circumstances. So that's, and it does, and it varies widely. The market for a bankruptcy attorney in this area can vary hugely. I mean, there are some lawyers who will do it for far too little, and that's my personal opinion. Is that when somebody charges or says they're going to do a bankruptcy for you for $500, I say look out, because they likely don't know what they're doing, or if they do know what they're doing, they're going to do it too quickly. They're going to do it it's going to be a very sloppy job, and they're going to miss a lot of stuff. Whereas you can also find attorneys and good attorneys who will charge 2-3 times what I might charge in a bankruptcy. So, but the cost is always what is the most frequent question. Okay.
Our guest today, Dave Hoskins, David C. Hoskins, attorney at law, downtown Denver, bankruptcy attorney. How can we reach you, Dave?
Well, my office number in Denver is 720-371-9623. I have a Pueblo phone number, 719-220-0398. I have an email address, which is dchoskins, D as in David, C as in Clark, HOSKINS @comcast.net. I have a website that is mybankruptcyhelper.com, and there are hyphens in between the my and bankruptcy and between the bankruptcy and helper. mybankruptcyhelper.com. I think if you Google my name, you can find me.
Oh, great. Hey, thanks for being my guest today on the program.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I hope I've been helpful.
Thanks for listening to Ask the Expert with Steve Sleeper. Join us next time as entrepreneurs and professionals share their intriguing stories of success and service.